The Unseen Weapon: How American Abundance Shattered Nazi Ideology. On a seemingly ordinary evening of June 4, 1943, along Railroad Street in Mexia, Texas, an extraordinary transformation began. Deep within a hidden diary, Unoffizier Vera Burkhart's pencil trembled as he penned words that, if discovered by his own officers, would surely have led to solitary confinement. The Americans must be lying to us. No nation could possess such abundance while fighting a war on two fronts. Just moments before, through the fleeting glimpse of a train window, he had witnessed a spectacle that utterly contradicted 3 years of fervent Nazi propaganda. Electric lights blazed forth from every farmhouse, illuminated every street corner, and glowed from every shop window. An endless, mesmerizing constellation of electricity stretching across the vast Texas plains at 10 o'clock at night. Back home in Germany, blackout regulations had plunged the Reich into a pervasive darkness since 1940. Even prior to the war, rural electrification barely reached a meager 20% of German farms. Yet here, in this land that Nazi propaganda had scornfully dismissed as a decadent, collapsing America, electricity flowed with the boundless ease of water. From the cushioned comfort of Pullman coaches, complete with dining services and sleeping berths, a stark contrast to the cattle cars and freight wagons typically used for troop transport, 1,850 seasoned veterans of Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps disembarked. The entire population of Mexia had gathered, drawn by curiosity, to witness their arrival. Little did any of them know that this very moment would ignite the most profound psychological metamorphosis in modern history. It was to be a systematic dismantling of Nazi ideology, achieved not through direct confrontation, but through the sheer, undeniable display of American industrial might. The intricate mathematics of Allied victory were being etched not in strategic battle plans, but in staggering production statistics that would soon shatter every preconceived notion these soldiers held about their enemies, their cherished homeland, and the very cause they had fought for. The seeds of this collapse had been sown on May 13, 1943, in Tunisia. General Jürgen von Arnim, Rommel's successor, made the fateful decision to surrender, bringing with him approximately 250,000 to 275,000 German and Italian soldiers. The exact numbers fluctuated as scattered units continued to yield over several days. Suddenly, the Wehrmacht's most experienced desert fighters, men who had relentlessly driven the British back to Egypt, who had even earned the grudging respect of Montgomery himself, found themselves prisoners. Among them was Headman Friedrich Radke, a decorated holder of the Iron Cross First Class, a veteran of the France campaign, and twice wounded in North Africa. His deeply personal diary, unearthed decades later in the National Archives, would become an invaluable historical record, offering the most detailed account of the psychological impact of American captivity on German soldiers. The arduous journey from military defeat to personal revelation commenced in the bustling port of Oran, Algeria. As Radke and 30,000 fellow POWs awaited transport ships in makeshift camps, the sheer efficiency of the American operation began to chip away at their deeply ingrained preconceptions. The U.S. Army processed thousands of prisoners daily with an organizational precision that far exceeded anything the Wehrmacht had ever achieved even at the zenith of its power. ID cards were photographed and meticulously filed, thorough medical examinations completed, vital inoculations administered, and the rights afforded by the Geneva Convention carefully explained in fluent German by American officers specifically trained for this sensitive task. Yet the first truly profound shock came with the food. Obergruppenleiter Hans Müller, captured with the 21st Panzer Division, vividly recounted in a letter to his mother 8 months later, In the cage at Oran while we waited for ships, the Americans fed us better than we had eaten in 6 months of desert warfare. White bread, real coffee, meat twice a day. We thought it was propaganda, that they were trying to impress us. We didn't realize this was their standard military ration.
The very vessels destined to carry them across the vast Atlantic, the Liberty ships, stood as colossal testaments to American industrial prowess. The SS Robert E. Peary, for instance, had been constructed in an astonishing 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes at Kaiser Shipyards in Richmond, California. A feat so unbelievable it would undoubtedly have been dismissed as fantastical propaganda by the Germans if they had known. These remarkable ships, churned out at an unprecedented rate of 3 per day at the peak of production, were returning from their missions of delivering vital supplies to the European theater. Instead of sailing back empty, they now bore human cargo, transporting up to 30,000 POWs per month by the summer of 1943. The 2-week Atlantic crossing in July 1943 inaugurated the second phase of this psychological demolition. Feldwebel Kurt Zimmermann of the 90th Light Division diligently kept a detailed account, preserved in letters to his family after his eventual repatriation. He noted with disbelief that the ship's crew daily discarded more food waste than his entire company had received in weekly rations during the brutal final months in Africa. The American sailors threw away half-eaten steaks, whole loaves of bread, gallons of milk that had sat too long, Zimmermann wrote, his words reflecting a deep bewilderment. They did this openly, without thought, not to mock us, but because to them this waste meant nothing. Their supply was limitless. The ships themselves transformed into floating classrooms, silently imparting lessons in American power. The POWs learned that their vessel was but one of 2,710 Liberty ships to be built during the war, each requiring 250,000 individual parts assembled from components manufactured across 32 states. Their engines, they discovered from chatty American guards, were constructed in 3 separate factories, each producing powerful 900-horsepower cylinders that were then assembled in ports that barely existed a mere 2 years prior. Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm von Steuben, whose aristocratic Prussian family boasted a lineage of service in every German war since Frederick the Great, would later confess in his memoirs, "As our ship approached the American coast, I watched the radar antenna rotating above the bridge. This technology, which we believed only we and perhaps the British possessed in limited quantities, was standard equipment on a cargo vessel. It was then I first suspected that Germany had already lost the war." August 2, 1943, marked their arrival at the Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia. The sheer immensity of this first American site utterly shattered the last lingering remnants of Nazi propaganda regarding American industrial weakness. The Norfolk base sprawled across an astonishing 4,300 acres, its docks stretching for miles, where massive cranes tirelessly loaded and unloaded dozens of ships simultaneously. In a single day, this one port managed more tonnage than the entire German port of Hamburg could handle. In a single day, this one port managed more tonnage than the entire German port of Hamburg could handle in a week. Gefreiter Johann Weber, a factory worker from the Ruhr before his conscription, meticulously counted 47 cargo ships at various stages of loading or unloading. Each crane, he recorded in his secret diary, effortlessly lifted loads that would have demanded a dozen men and horses back in Germany. They moved with electric power, smoothly, continuously, without the coal smoke that choked our industrial cities, he observed, marveling at the clean efficiency. The prisoners were then organized into columns for the march to the waiting trains. Along their route, they passed sprawling parking lots teeming with civilian automobiles, hundreds of them belonging to ordinary dock workers. In Germany, private car ownership remained a rare privilege, reserved for the wealthy and the party elite. The Volkswagen,
promised to the German people since 1934 remained largely a propaganda dream, with fewer than 1,000 ever actually delivered to civilians. Here, however, common laborers simply drove to work in their own vehicles. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared them for the trains themselves. These were not cramped boxcars, nor the dreaded 40-and-8 wagons designed to carry 40 men or 8 horses that had transported German troops across Europe. Instead, they were full passenger coaches, luxurious Pullman cars with plush padded seats that converted into comfortable sleeping berths, elegant dining cars adorned with white tablecloths and gleaming silver cutlery, and observation cars offering panoramic views. Hedman Rodka simply wrote, "We boarded like tourists, not prisoners." The American guards, surprisingly, seemed almost embarrassed by the opulence. One sergeant even offered an apology that the air conditioning in their particular car wasn't functioning perfectly. Air conditioning in August? We had believed such luxury existed only in Hitler's personal train, Rodka recounted, the irony heavy in his words. The 3-day train journey from Norfolk into the heartland camps of Texas and Oklahoma would prove even more devastating to Nazi ideology than any military defeat. As the train steadily rolled through Virginia, the prisoners pressed their faces against the windows, captivated by an America that, according to everything they had been told, simply could not exist. Every small town they passed blazed with dazzling illumination. Martinsville, Danville, Greensboro, communities that in Germany would have been fortunate to boast a single electric street lamp, here displayed brightly lit shop windows, flashing electric signs, and houses with lights burning in multiple rooms. The train swept past factories operating continuous night shifts, their windows glowing, their parking lots still full even at midnight. Obergefreiter Muir, whose father was a committed Nazi Party bloc leader in Hamburg, wrote in a letter discovered in 1987, "We passed through dozens of cities that first night. Every one had more electricity than all of Hamburg combined. The guards told us this was normal, that every American town had electricity since the 1920s. I called him a liar. He just shrugged and said we would see." In Roanoke, Virginia, the train paused briefly for water and coal. The prisoners watched, mesmerized, as American railway workers completed in a mere 30 minutes what would have consumed 2 hours back in Germany. Automated coal loaders, powerful electric water pumps, mechanized lubrication systems, every facet of the operation unequivocally demonstrated technological superiority. Even more unsettling was the casual display of wealth by the workers themselves. They wore sturdy leather boots that would have cost a German laborer 2 months' wages. They sipped Coca-Cola from gleaming glass bottles, tossing the empties into bins without a second thought. They smoked cigarettes continuously, often stubbing them out half-finished, a testament to abundant supply. Feldwebel Heinrich Müller, an electrical engineer from Siemens before the war, calculated with a growing sense of despair that the single railway yard they stopped in consumed more electricity in 1 hour than his entire district in Berlin used in a day. "The waste was magnificent," he wrote. "They left lights burning in empty buildings. Electric fans ran in vacant rooms. It was the carelessness of infinite resource." As the trains traversed into Tennessee and Kentucky, the prisoners encountered the full, staggering spectacle of American industrial power. Through the windows, they gazed upon endless factories, each one far larger than anything most had ever witnessed in Germany. The Alcoa aluminum plant in Tennessee stretched for 3 imposing miles along the river, its electric furnaces voraciously consuming 175,000 kilowatts of power, a figure exceeding the total consumption of the entire city of Munich. Near Louisville, the train slowed as they passed the Rubber Town complex, where colossal synthetic rubber plants had sprung from empty fields in an astonishing 18 months. 4 massive facilities, each employing thousands of workers, were churning out an incredible 800,000 tons of synthetic rubber annually. Germany, despite having invented the process, had never managed more than 120,000 tons, even in its most productive year. Oberleutnant Erich Hoffmann, a chemist from IG Farben, immediately grasped the profound implications. In a post-war interview, he recalled, "I knew those plants. I could see the distillation columns, the catalytic crackers. Each facility was more advanced than anything we had built, and there were 4 of them just in this one location. They told us there were dozens more across the country." The trains continued past Ford's legendary Willow Run plant outside Detroit, a behemoth visible from miles away. This single factory, constructed in just 9 months, was producing a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. At its peak, 42,000 workers meticulously assembled these bombers from 1,550,000 parts, manufactured by 1,500 subcontractors. The plant itself encompassed a staggering 2.5 million square feet of floor space and consumed more electricity than the entire German city of Cologne. Hauptmann Wehrli, a Luftwaffe pilot shot down over Tunisia, pressed his face against the window as they passed, counting 17 B-24s in various stages of completion, visible from the train. "We had been told American planes were inferior, hastily built, would fall apart in combat, but I could see the precision of the assembly lines, the quality of the construction. These were not inferior aircraft. They were simply built faster than we could imagine possible." The deeper the trains ventured into the American landscape, the more thoroughly the fabric of Nazi mythology unraveled. In St. Louis, they crossed the mighty Mississippi River on the iconic Eads Bridge, while below them, barges laden with grain carried more than Germany's entire harvest of 1942. The prisoners gazed upon towering grain elevators stretching along both banks, each capable of holding enough wheat to feed a German city for months. Unteroffizier Karl Schmidt, a farmer's son from Bavaria, recorded in his diary, "The Americans transport food as we transport ammunition, in endless quantities, without concern for loss. I watched them loading a single barge with enough wheat to feed my entire village for 5 years. The crane operator was eating a sandwich with meat thicker than our weekly ration." In Kansas City, the train halted at a colossal stockyard where tens of thousands of cattle awaited slaughter. The pervasive aroma of meat-packing plants permeated the air for miles around. German POWs, who had barely subsisted on 200 grams of meat per week in Africa, if they were lucky, watched American workers casually devouring beef sandwiches during their lunch break. "They ate meat like we ate bread. No, that's wrong. They ate meat like we wished we could eat bread. The guard bought us hamburgers from a stand near the station. Meat, cheese, vegetables on white bread for 15 cents. He bought 20 of them without thinking, paid with a single dollar bill. This was not special. This was their normal food." The arrival at the camps themselves delivered the next potent blow in this process of cognitive demolition. Camp Hearn, Texas, remarkably constructed in just 4 months, provided accommodation for between 3,000 and 4,800 prisoners in conditions that frequently surpassed what most had known as civilians. Wooden barracks offered electric lights, flush toilets, hot showers, and steam heat. Each building was constructed with more lumber than entire German villages possessed. The camp hospital particularly astonished the medical personnel among the prisoners. Oberstleutnant Dr. Friedrich Bauer, chief surgeon of the 164th Light Division, found himself in a facility better equipped than most German civilian hospitals, boasting X-ray machines, advanced surgical equipment, and pharmaceutical supplies that had been utterly unavailable in Germany since 1941. All of this was standard provision for enemy prisoners. They had penicillin, this miracle drug that we had only heard rumors about. They used it freely, even on prisoners with minor infections. German soldiers were dying for want of basic sulfa drugs, and the Americans were giving us their most advanced medicine without hesitation.
The camp kitchen, too, became an involuntary classroom in American prosperity. Prisoners assigned to cooking duties discovered sprawling walk-in refrigerators, powerful electric mixers, automated dishwashers, and gas ranges capable of preparing meals for 5,000 men. The daily ration generously included fresh milk, eggs, meat, vegetables, and white bread, quantities that German civilians hadn't seen since 1939. Feldwebel Otto Krebs, a former hotel chef from Munich, wrote with a heavy heart, "Today, we threw away more food than my family has seen in 3 years. Not spoiled food, simply excess. The American regulations require we prepare 10% more than needed to ensure every prisoner receives full rations. The surplus is discarded. I wept as I threw perfectly good bread into the garbage." By September 1943, a burgeoning labor shortage in American agriculture spurred the decision to employ POWs in fields and factories across the nation. This pragmatic choice, born of necessity, would ultimately prove more effective in dismantling Nazi ideology than any pre-planned propaganda campaign. Groups of prisoners were routinely trucked daily to various work sites, traversing the American heartland without blindfolds or restricted routes. They witnessed everything: the endless sprawling fields of corn and wheat, factories humming with activity across 3 shifts, shops overflowing with goods, parking lots crammed with cars, and houses equipped with refrigerators and radios. At a cotton gin outside Houston, Unteroffizier Herbert Lang watched a single machine process more cotton in 1 hour than his entire village could have handled in a month using traditional methods. The gin was powered by electricity from the Colorado River Authority, a testament to a rural electrification program that had already brought power to 90% of Texas farms by 1943. The farmer who owned the gin was nobody special, Lang recorded, reflecting on the profound implications. Not aristocracy, not the party member, just the farmer. Yet he had electricity, running water, a truck, a car, and a tractor. His workers, including the Negroes, ate lunch from boxes containing more food than German workers received in a week. And this was normal. Every farm we passed was the same.
In Nebraska, prisoners toiled in vast sugar beet fields, encountering agricultural mechanization that defied their comprehension. They learned that a single combine harvester could accomplish the work of 100 men. The fields stretched majestically to the horizon, each one larger than entire German counties. The farmers spoke casually of yields that would have been sheer fantasy in Germany. 60 bushels of wheat per acre, compared to Germany's best lands yielding only 30. Gefreiter Wilhelm Hofmann, working on a farm near Scottsbluff, wrote, "The farmer's son, a boy of 16, drove a tractor worth more than everything my father had earned in his lifetime. When I mentioned this, the boy laughed and said it wasn't even a particularly good tractor. His father was waiting for a new model from John Deere that would be even better." However, the most profoundly devastating revelations emerged for those prisoners who worked in or near American factories. While Geneva Convention rules prohibited direct war production work, POWs were permitted to labor in industries that freed American workers from military service. This clever technicality allowed thousands of German prisoners to witness American industrial capacity firsthand. At a Campbell's soup factory in New Jersey, prisoners watched in awe as production lines processed more tomatoes in a single day than most German factories handled in a month. The facility operated with a skeleton crew of women and elderly men, as most young workers were serving in the military. Yet production effortlessly exceeded peacetime levels. Stabsfeldwebel Ernst Wagner, who had worked in a German food processing plant before the war, meticulously documented the experience. Everything was automated: electric conveyor belts, automatic filling machines, steam cookers that processed hundreds of cans simultaneously. One elderly woman monitored controls that managed what would have required 50 workers in Germany. She did this while listening to a radio and drinking coffee. Near Detroit, prisoners unloading coal at a power plant caught glimpses of the automotive industry's astounding conversion to war production. The sprawling River Rouge complex, clearly visible across the water, employed 100,000 workers, tirelessly producing jeeps, aircraft engines, and tanks. The plant consumed 1.5 million kilowatts of electricity daily, more than the entire city of Hamburg. "We could see the parking lots," wrote Obergefreiter Franz Kellner. Thousands of cars belonging to workers. Workers! In Germany, even our officers rarely owned cars. Here, factory workers drove to work. The guard told us many workers owned 2 cars, one for work, one for family use. We thought he was mocking us. By the winter of 1943, the cumulative force of these observations began to manifest in what American intelligence officers termed ideological collapse syndrome among the prisoners. The Special Projects Division, a clandestine re-education program meticulously overseen by the Provost Marshal General's office, documented an increasing number of prisoners actively requesting access to American newspapers, books, and educational materials. Major Paul Neuland, a key member of the monitoring team, reported in December 1943, "The prisoners no longer argue when shown production statistics. They have seen too much. The most fanatical Nazis have become quiet. They still maintain loyalty to Germany, but no longer speak of victory. Many openly question what they were told about America." The camp newspapers, thoughtfully produced by the prisoners themselves, gradually began to reflect this profound transformation. Der Ruf, The Call, published at Fort Kearny, Rhode Island, progressively shifted its editorial focus from defiant nationalism to thoughtful discussions of democracy, economic systems, and the future of post-war reconstruction. The editors, carefully chosen from among anti-Nazi prisoners, found their audience increasingly receptive to these new ideas. Lieutenant Hermann Goetz, captured with the 10th Panzer Division, wrote in a letter that successfully navigated American censors, "We were told America was a mongrel nation, weak, divided, controlled by Jews, incapable of military prowess. Every day I am here, I see the opposite. This is the most organized, unified, and powerful nation on earth. We were told fairy tales by criminals."
The most devastating blow to the very core of Nazi ideology came from an entirely unexpected source: the treatment of Italian prisoners after Italy's surrender in September 1943. Italian POWs who agreed to cooperate were formed into Italian service units, granted superior quarters, increased pay, and significantly more freedom. German prisoners watched with growing disbelief as their former allies worked alongside Americans, dined in American restaurants, and some even began dating American women. Hetman Friedrich Schultz expressed his profound bewilderment. "The Italians betrayed us, yet they are treated better than we treated them as allies. They work freely, earn money, send packages home.
The Americans show them no hatred. This democracy we were taught to despise appears more honorable than our own system. Christmas 1943 proved to be an event of immense psychological impact. American organizations, local churches, and various civic groups orchestrated a remarkable outpouring of generosity, sending 500,000 Christmas packages to German POWs, men who, just months earlier, had been actively trying to kill American soldiers. Each package was thoughtfully filled with cigarettes, candy, toiletries, and games. Local communities extended invitations to prisoners for Christmas dinners, though regulations regrettably prevented most from accepting. At Camp Hearn, Texas, the local Methodist church choir performed Christmas carols in German for the prisoners, a gesture that moved many to tears. Women from Hearn lovingly sent in homemade cookies and cakes, and the local Boy Scouts delivered handmade Christmas cards. This profound kindness shown toward enemies utterly shattered the final remnants of Nazi racial theory. Oberleutnant Walter Möller, whose brother had tragically died in the bombing of Hamburg, wrote, "They know we are their enemies. Many have sons and husbands fighting against our armies, yet they show us Christian charity, not propaganda, but genuine kindness. What kind of people treat enemies this way? Only those absolutely certain of victory and secure in their power." The Christmas feast itself defied all comprehension. Roasted turkey, succulent ham, creamy mashed potatoes, rich gravy, fresh vegetables, pies, and ice cream. Quantities of food that Germany hadn't seen since before the First World War. The prisoners ate until they were physically ill, simply unable to grasp such abundant resources being lavished upon their enemies. "We ate like kings," wrote Feldwebel Hansa, "better than German generals eat, better than party leaders, and this was not special. The guards told us this was a normal American Christmas dinner, that every American family was eating the same meal. If they can feed prisoners this way, what must their own soldiers eat?" By early 1944, a staggering number, over 40,000 German prisoners had voluntarily enrolled in comprehensive educational programs. They immersed themselves in studying English, American history, mathematics, and various sciences. The prestigious University of Chicago even provided correspondence courses, and Stanford University dispatched its esteemed professors to lecture on democracy and economics. The thirst for knowledge among these once hardened soldiers was insatiable. Prisoners who had been indoctrinated to believe Americans were cultureless barbarians now discovered sprawling libraries boasting millions of books, welcoming universities open to all social classes, and scientific research that led the world. They freely read American newspapers, comparing multiple viewpoints, a luxury utterly impossible in Nazi Germany. Hauptmann Dr. Wilhelm von Braun, a physicist conscripted from the renowned Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, attended lectures on atomic physics at Camp Shelby. He later wrote, "American professors, including Jewish refugees from Germany, taught us without hatred. They spoke of science as universal, belonging to all humanity. They were years ahead of German research, and they shared knowledge with enemies. This generosity of spirit was incomprehensible to minds shaped by Nazi ideology." The camp theaters regularly screened American films, not propaganda, but genuine Hollywood productions. They watched classics like Gone with the Wind, observing a depiction of American defeat and recovery that resonated deeply with their own situation. They also saw The Grapes of Wrath, amazed that Americans would publicly display such profound self-criticism even to their enemies. "They hide nothing," wrote Lieutenant Joseph Kramer. "They show their problems, their failures, their conflicts, yet this honesty makes them stronger, not weaker. In Germany, such criticism would mean death. Here, it is considered patriotic." Spring 1944 ushered in expanded prisoner labor programs as American production surged to its absolute peak. German POWs were deployed to canneries, mills, and fabrication plants across the nation, directly witnessing the full, overwhelming might of American industrial capacity. The sheer numbers alone told a story that no amount of propaganda could possibly counter.
At the Higgins Boat Factory in New Orleans, prisoners unloaded steel destined to become landing craft for the D-Day invasion. They watched as workers expertly assembled 700 boats per month, each one requiring a staggering 20,000 individual parts. The factory employed 20,000 workers, including thousands of women who confidently operated massive cranes, skillfully welded hulls, and meticulously managed production lines. Stabsfeld-Weibel Kurt Zimmermann wrote with an almost bewildered admiration. Women doing men's work, Negroes operating complex machinery, teenagers running drilling equipment. Everything we were told was impossible in a democracy. Yet production never stopped. 3 shifts, 24 hours, 7 days a week. They produced more boats in a month than our entire Navy built in a year. At Republic Steel in Ohio, prisoners bore witness to the daily production of 10,000 tons of steel. The colossal blast furnaces roared continuously, fed by endless trains of iron ore from Minnesota and coal from Pennsylvania. The scale of this operation utterly defied German comprehension. This single plant produced more steel than the entire Ruhr at its peak. "I worked at Krupp before the war," wrote Obergefreiter Paul Hartmann. "I thought I understood industrial production, but this was beyond imagination. They wasted more steel and spillage than we could produce with slave labor and double shifts." The summer 1944 harvest delivered the ultimate demolition of Nazi propaganda concerning American weakness. German prisoners toiled across the vast Midwest, witnessing agricultural production on a scale that could feed the entire world. In Kansas, they watched wheat harvests, where single farms produced more grain than entire German provinces. Combines moved across the fields like majestic ships across a golden ocean, each one harvesting 100 acres per day. The towering grain elevators they filled could hold more wheat than Germany imported in an entire year. Unteroffizier Franz Weber, a farmer from East Prussia, wrote with a profound sense of awe. "One American farmer with machinery does the work of 100 German farmers. They showed me aerial photographs of the wheat fields, thousands of square miles of grain. They could lose half their harvest and still have more than all of Europe combined." In California's Central Valley, prisoners picked fruit in orchards that stretched seemingly beyond the horizon. They watched, astonished, as perfectly good fruit was discarded for minor blemishes, fruit that would have been treasured and rationed in Germany. Entire crops were sometimes plowed under simply to maintain prices, a concept that triggered profound psychological breakdown among prisoners from hunger-ravaged Germany. "They destroyed food to keep prices stable," wrote Gefreiter Otto Schultz. "Mountains of oranges bulldozed into pits because they had too many. We begged to be allowed to send them to Germany to our families. The guards were sympathetic, but explained it was impossible. The waste was strategic proof of unlimited resources."
June 6, 1944. When the momentous news of the Normandy invasion finally reached the camps, German prisoners experienced their final devastating ideological collapse. The sheer, audacious scale of the operation, 6,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 150,000 men in the initial wave, showcased American organizational capacity beyond Nazi Germany's wildest, most ambitious dreams. Prisoners at Camp Shelby watched newsreels of the invasion within days, utterly stunned. They saw the endless streams of ships, the miraculous artificial harbors, and the intricate supply system that tirelessly delivered 15,000 tons daily across open beaches. They watched their homeland being systematically crushed by the very nation they had been told was too weak to fight. Obergefreiter Friedrich von Tauben wrote, his words heavy with resignation, "We knew then that everything was lost, not just the war, but the entire Nazi project. We had challenged the world's greatest industrial power with fairy tales and racial mythology. We sent horses against their trucks, rifles against their automatic weapons, courage against their unlimited resources."
Throughout their long captivity, German prisoners experienced something that challenged the core tenets of Nazi ideology even more profoundly than any material wealth: American humanity. Despite relentless propaganda that depicted Americans as weak and overly sentimental, the POWs discovered a people secure enough in their immense strength to consistently show mercy. When Gefreiter Hans Miller's son tragically died in the Hamburg bombing, the American camp commander personally delivered the Red Cross message and offered heartfelt condolences. When Lieutenant Paul Fisher's wife wrote that she was struggling desperately to feed their children, American church groups without hesitation sent food packages to her in Germany, to enemy civilians in a nation America was actively bombing. They separated the German people from the Nazi regime, wrote Hauptmann Otto. They said they were fighting Hitler, not Germans. This distinction, which initially seemed like propaganda, proved genuinely true. They prepared us to rebuild Germany after the war, not to destroy it. The medical treatment, in particular, deeply affected the prisoners. German doctors found themselves working side by side with American medical staff, learning innovative new techniques and utilizing advanced equipment. Prisoners received operations that would have been accessible only to the elite in Germany. Mental health treatment, virtually unheard of in the Wehrmacht, was compassionately provided to traumatized soldiers. Dr. Friedrich Bauer wrote, "They treated attempted suicides with counseling, not punishment. Prisoners with mental breakdowns received therapy, not beatings. This humanity toward enemies revealed a strength we never understood, the confidence of true power." By March 1945, the clandestine re-education program had yielded remarkable and unexpected results. Over 25,000 prisoners had enthusiastically volunteered for democracy courses. The camp newspapers actively published articles about constitutional government, free markets, and civil rights. Lively discussion groups debated Germany's potential future after the war. The program's success far exceeded all initial expectations. Prisoners who had arrived as fanatical Nazis were now writing thoughtful essays about democratic reconstruction. Officers who had once sworn unwavering oaths to Hitler were meticulously planning how to implement American agricultural methods in post-war Germany. "We became missionaries for democracy," admitted Oberst Hermann Göring, no relation to the Reich Marshal, in a 1975 interview. "Not through coercion or propaganda, but through observation. We saw it work. We saw ordinary people living better than German aristocracy. We wanted that for Germany."
The transformation was so comprehensive that American authorities actually grew concerned that prisoners were becoming too enthusiastic about American ways. Some boldly requested to remain in America after the war. Others married American women they had met through prison correspondence programs. Ultimately, thousands would immigrate to America in the 1950s, seeking a new life. April 1945 brought the final, horrifying revelation. As American forces liberated concentration camps in Germany, the chilling footage was shown to German POWs. Many initially refused to believe it, vehemently claiming it was mere propaganda. But the overwhelming evidence left no room for doubt. Eyewitness testimony from American soldiers, searing photographs, horrifying newsreels, and eventually corroborating letters from Germany itself, all confirmed the unimaginable horror. The psychological impact was utterly devastating. Men who had managed to maintain some semblance of pride in German honor, despite military defeat, now confronted the complete moral collapse of their nation. Everything they had fought for was not merely defeated, but irredeemably evil. Headman Walter Schmidt penned the most eloquent summary of this crushing realization. "We thought we were warriors for a great cause. We discovered we were tools of criminals. We believed we were bringing civilization to inferior peoples. We found that we were the barbarians. The Americans we called weak and decadent showed us what civilization actually meant. As the war finally drew to a close in May 1945, German POWs faced repatriation with a complex mix of emotions. They had witnessed an America that utterly contradicted every single belief they had held. They had eaten better as prisoners than they ever had as soldiers. They had been treated with more dignity by their enemies than by their own government. The final months of their captivity were spent diligently preparing for their return to a Germany that lay destroyed. American authorities thoughtfully provided vocational training, agricultural education, and crucial political instruction. Prisoners learned about the Marshall Plan even before its official announcement, understanding that America intended to rebuild rather than punish Germany. "They prepared us to rebuild our country," wrote Oberst Friedrich von Tauben. "They gave us skills, knowledge, hope. They transformed defeated soldiers into future citizens." This generosity from victors was incomprehensible to minds shaped by Nazi vindictiveness. Between 1945 and 1946, a remarkable 371,683 German POWs were repatriated from American camps. They returned to a Germany divided, devastated, and destitute. But they carried with them something truly precious: the invaluable knowledge of how a vibrant, democratic, industrial society functioned. The German POWs who had experienced American prosperity firsthand became unwitting yet powerful agents of transformation in post-war Germany. They had personally witnessed industrial efficiency, unparalleled agricultural productivity, and the tangible fruits of democratic prosperity. They now knew, with absolute certainty, that reconstruction was possible because they had seen a society that had already achieved it. Many former POWs ascended to prominence in West Germany's miraculous reconstruction. Hans Kroll, a prisoner at Camp Shelby, went on to become West German ambassador to the United States. Walter Hallstein, who had taught classes at Camp Co., became president of the European Commission. Rudiger von Mark, held at Camp Herne, served as Germany's permanent representative to the United Nations. Edward Ackermann, a prisoner at Fort Robinson, emerged as a leader in German agricultural reform. They diligently brought American methods to German industry, American efficiency to German agriculture, and the powerful ideals of American democracy to German politics. The economic miracle of the 1950s was in part built upon the profound knowledge gained within American prison camps. "We learned that prosperity came from freedom, not conquest," Hans Kroll wrote in his memoirs. "We saw that democracy created wealth, that diversity brought strength, that treating workers well increased production. These lessons learned as prisoners shaped the new Germany."
Historians universally laud the German POW experience in America as one of the most successful re-education programs in human history. Without coercion, without traditional propaganda, the sheer, undeniable force of American industrial might and the compelling example of democracy converted hardened Nazis into future democratic citizens. The program's success lay not in persuasive words, but in tangible observation. Prisoners witnessed American society functioning at peak efficiency while consistently treating its enemies with unwavering dignity. They bore witness to an industrial capacity that made German production seem primitive by comparison. They experienced a standard of living that exposed Nazi promises as hollow fantasies. Dr. Arnold Kramer, the leading historian of German POWs in America, definitively concluded, "America won the propaganda war not through clever messages, but through sheer reality. Every full meal, every electric light, every working toilet was an argument against Nazism. The POWs were converted by prosperity." Statistical evidence strongly supports this assessment. Of the 371,683 German POWs held in America, a remarkably low figure of fewer than 1% attempted escape, with only 2,222 total attempts ever recorded. Post-war surveys revealed that an astonishing 95% rated their treatment as good or excellent. Most remarkably, thousands maintained heartwarming correspondence with American families for decades after the war, with an average duration of 31 years. Many even returned later as tourists or cherished business partners. Treatment assessments consistently showed that 95% rated their treatment as good or excellent, 74% believed their captivity positively changed their worldview, and 61% expressed a keen interest in learning about democracy. By 1945, fewer than 10% maintained strong Nazi beliefs. The German POWs who truly experienced American industrial might did not simply witness history unfold, they were fundamentally transformed by it. Their captivity blossomed into a profound education. Their defeat became an unexpected enlightenment. And their imprisonment ultimately became a liberation from the ideological chains of Nazism. In the end, America's greatest victory was not secured solely on the battlefield, but within the confines of these prison camps, where the overwhelming, undeniable evidence of democratic prosperity accomplished what armies alone could not: the complete transformation of enemy minds. The POWs had arrived,